Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is David Fairweather. David is a registered psychotherapist who works with people's minds to help them gain control over their own thoughts, feelings, and behavior. In essence, to gain greater mastery of self and their situation, leading to greater satisfaction from both work and life. By combining psychotherapeutic techniques with EEG brainwave biofeedback and evidence-based stress response diagnostics, David works with coaching clients to achieve objective, observable results of self-mastery as evidenced in measurable successes and physiological and/or psychological change. Previously employed by York University to provide stress and anxiety reduction workshops for their Faculty of Health, David was responsible for implementing several innovative technological advancements into the School of Nursing's research on learning and performing under pressure. Originally an aerospace engineer, David has over 20 years' experience as a corporate consultant, technical expert, and high-end 3D computer-aided design and stress analysis technology trainer to some of the largest aerospace and automotive companies in North America. David is a quick-witted, intelligent guy with a fantastic sense of humor, and Bob and I are so pleased to have him here on the show today. Audience, welcome. David, hi.
Hi there, Christine, Bob.
Yes, David, we're so happy to have you on our show. And audience, you are in for a real treat. We have David Fairweather, and he has some amazing information to deliver to us today. So, David, as a stress expert, can you explain to our audience just how debilitating the effects of chronic stress can be and why they should seriously consider addressing their stress sooner rather than later?
Well, that's a good question, Bob. Thanks. In essence, stress is the number one cause of death in the world. And it's certainly the number one cause of wear and tear in most people's lives and has a deep impact on people's life expectancy. In my experience, when someone develops some kind of stress souvenir, as I call it, whether that's premature graying or a hypersensitized nervous system, it effectively becomes hardwired into your neurology or your physiology. I don't know anyone whose hair's turned from grey back to brown or black once their stress is resolved. So once you hit an issue and it becomes part of your genetic makeup, I think you're stuck with it. And there are lots of things where they become kind of ingrained and also kind of hardwired in, although I don't really like that term, but neurologically kind of hardwired in. It becomes very difficult to change that neurological habit, that habit of thinking, that habit of responding once it's set in, because it's so difficult to unlearn how to ride a bicycle. Once you know how to do it, you're not going to forget that. I think we take on stress souvenirs and then it just becomes part of us, and we carry that burden going forwards for whatever length of life we have left afterwards. So I think it's super important that when you start to develop some kind of stress-related issue, that you resolve it before it turns into a big problem. Kind of fix the crack in the wall before it hits the foundations, and you're looking at replacing the whole building, which we can't do with our bodies.
Wow, David, I really like that. Stress souvenir, you're the first person to bring that up, and what it made me think of, there's a famous, or rather maybe it's infamous TV commercial where Walt Frazier is on television, and they talk about, they show a guy who has the gray beard and he's constantly being rejected, and then they brush this stuff into his beard, and then all of a sudden he's a hottie. So when you were saying that, I said, oh, well, if there were a way to just transform your appearance. But I want to thank you for that. That is the first, I think that is an excellent metaphor, a stress souvenir, and I think our audience, really gets it, is that that's not a souvenir you really want to get if you don't have to, right?
Absolutely, something to avoid. I was very taken by Hans Selye's kind of description of how people kind of go to bed at night and they wake up feeling refreshed in the morning, feeling like they've overcome their stress of the day. And what he pointed out was that adaptation energy doesn't replenish. It's like every night you go to bed and you go to the freezer, take out another block of it, defrost it while you sleep, and then you wake up feeling like you've got more of it. But you're not aware that, well, there's a finite reserve in the freezer, and once that's empty, that was your last day on the planet.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. Did I say you were intelligent? Well, you really are. And I will give up any stress souvenir that causes one gray hair on my head. So
absolutely.
So David, this is a great segue into our next question, which is
okay.
According to recent studies and surveys by the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, and the U.S. Census Bureau, stress and stress burnout are now America's #1 health challenge. What tools and techniques do you use to help clients overcome their potentially devastating consequences of stress and burnout?
Well, fundamentally, the biggest obstacle is the person themselves. So when you're talking to the average type A who is just absolutely driven by productivity and outcome, for you to suggest to them that that's going to cause them a problem, they initially think that that's ridiculous. That's their identity. I can't work less. What do you mean get a C in college? I want A's. That avoiding the burnout requires them to realize that they're actually open to that problem rather than, your kind of average teenager that does life-threatening things on bicycles and skateboards and doesn't really contemplate mortality. We need to first be aware that time on the planet is finite, and what we do and how we spend our stress energy is it's a precious resource. So seeing it as that resource then opens people's eyes to kind of awareness of what extraneous or superfluous things that they do habitually that they don't need to do, that would stop them wasting the gas in the first place, taking the shortest trip, working smart rather than hard. So it's an attitude adjustment, essentially. I'm kind of oversimplifying a little bit, but essentially an attitude adjustment and their realization that just because they wake up feeling refreshed tomorrow doesn't mean that they've not had a consequence from their lifestyle. So bringing people's awareness to the consequences and having them live and work in a way that respects that and does respect the temple that their body is and the preciousness of the relationships in their life and everything else, there has to be great balance. And so I don't know that I'm answering your question about a specific tool or a technique, but essentially awareness and appropriate action. I like to think of attention, awareness, and action, that you need to attend to the issue, like looking at a picture of Where's Waldo. You can be giving all your attention to it, but you may have no awareness of where he is. And then when you have the awareness that, this is causing me a problem, well, then you have to take action. I don't think anyone's going to stare at Where's Waldo, find him, and then get stuck on the page looking for more. We turn the page and move on. So there has to be an appropriate action to the awareness that's created based on the attention that was seeking that awareness. And as I kind of call it, focus, feedback, and follow through. We focus on what the problems could be. We use feedback, whether that's diagnostic or whether that's kind of EEG brain scanning, something that gives feedback, and then there has to be an appropriate follow-through in order to avoid the consequences as much as possible.
I'm enthralled. You've said a mouthful, and you've really covered so much with that, David, and you've said it very eloquently. The thoughts and images that came to my own mind is that many of us are habituated to our bad behaviors, our stress souvenirs. And we can't imagine what we do without this. So when you talk about the awareness, I mean, I've done this in the past. My girlfriends and I have given it up, that we'll have a phone call and we'll talk for hours and hours about what we don't like, what's wrong, and, it could be better and we could do it, but we never get to the action. That the thrill of it is to have this conversation where you spend hours commiserating. And as what you said is, time is finite. Why not take an action that moves you toward health and wholeness?
Absolutely. We could talk till the cows come home, but it won't achieve anything but playing kind of Eric Burns games that people play, just giving us some transactional credit that makes us feel a bit better, but does nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and I mean that's a treadmill I think that many people are on that really contributes to keeping so much stress in our lives. You know, one of the other things, David, I think that many are, I'll use the word, many are suffering from today is lack of sleep. So many people have difficulty falling asleep at night. The insomnia that comes that you're in bed, but you're so stressed out from your day that you just don't fall asleep, and it's this perpetuating cycle. How do you help clients to resolve the sleep challenges, which I think come from stress, because it's that turn your mind off at night so that you can sleep?
Well, essentially, to me, I kind of view it as adrenaline-based and worry-based, an adrenaline and worry-based habit. I've had the joy of experiencing, obviously, the only thing that separates a normal person from someone with insomnia is normal people don't wonder if they're going to fall asleep when they go to bed that night. And that it's part of that worry that brings on a threat, because I think of a threat response rather than a stress response. Anything that we feel is threatening, our sleep will be threatened this evening, can put us into a worry cycle, further adrenalize us, and make it really difficult to chemically break through to falling asleep. So just techniques to get people to realize what they're worrying about, work with their thoughts, and kind of help them change sleep habits. Sometimes, giving up on a night of sleep might be the way that the next day they're just going to pass out from sheer exhaustion. There's lots of ways that I work with sleep challenges, but ultimately, if you reduce someone's worrying and you reduce their adrenal output so they're not just infused with that really toxic chemical, then they're just going to fall asleep naturally. Babies do it all the time, and they're not that bright.
What a line.
Sounds like a plan that works. Sounds like a winner.
Well, I found it to be true. Ask a baby, you'll find out they will be clueless in this.
I believe it. Audience, on that note, we'll take a short break, and we'll be back on Learn to Live Stress-Free with our featured guest, David Fairweather.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Wright, Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series. I'm an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. My published study is the first to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, nitric oxide spiking, and the relaxation response. And my practical application of this knowledge helps you relieve the stresses of everyday life. I have the tools to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email me to find out how you can start to feel better now at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact. Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or pursuing a treasured dream? Christine Wright specializes in helping her coaching clients to lay out clear, elegant strategies. She shows you how to quickly build your confidence to uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Christine helps you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let Christine know that you're ready to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free as we continue our conversation with our featured guest today, David Fairweather.
David, before the break, you just made an amazing comment about how a baby doesn't worry about falling asleep because it's not thinking about it. And so that is a really brilliant connection that you've made there, that when we're able to reduce worry, because it's actually causing overarousal that stimulates the adrenal glands, that when you figure out a way to just not be worrying, so whatever it takes to turn off your mind. And so thank you. I know there are people in our audience that will thank you for that. And, of course, they want to know, well, how how do I turn my mind off? And we will be getting to that. So one of the looming issues for many people in our society, David, is, as you know, is anxiety. And you are also an anxiety expert. So according to the National Institute of Mental Health, 18% of adults, or 40 million Americans, suffer from a serious anxiety disorder. How do you coach clients who come to you with this issue, and what do you do to help them resolve their anxiety?
Essentially, I need people to understand that they're doing their problem, that it's not a medical condition that they've got that sits aside from them that they can treat with medication. That really just, I guess, makes it difficult for them to do their problem. But they're doing their problem, whether they've got medication going on or not. And I need people to really get, from my perspective, anxiety is it's a misuse of imagination, in essence. Really inspired by something I saw on TV a while ago. There's an Outward Bound guy called Bear Grylls, takes celebrities out to mountains and took Obama out to see the ice caps melting and stuff like that. He did this one with Ed Helms from The Office, and they dropped Ed on the top of a mountain, and he's absolutely scared to death of heights. And while Bear Grylls was kind of getting the ropes together and the sleeping bags and everything else, right at the edge of the cliff, Ed was just holding a tree, gripping it with his life. Because as far as he was concerned, the tree was the only thing holding him from certain death. Now, Bear, on the other hand, was focused on climbing up the mountain, getting the stuff together. So he was in a productive side of his mind, and Ed was in a destructive side of his mind, because essentially there are two sides to pretty much everything in this three-dimensional universe, and you can focus on one extreme or the other. And I think that the imagination covers this gamut. You can either focus on good imaginative things, like I'm going to climb up this mountain, it's going to be great, or you can focus on the other end of that spectrum, which is I'm going to die in a second if I let hold of this tree. So that misuse of imagination, I think, becomes habitual for people. Certainly very, very useful for a tightrope walker if they're crossing between one tower building to the next on a tightrope, for them to focus on the goal, where they're going to get to, the other end of that rope. And if instead they focus on the infinite number of places that they could become jam or roadkill below, then they just are making their creative imagination go wild in a horror story. But they could be focused on that success. So getting people to realize they're an active participant in the problem that they've created with anxiety, and getting them to align their thinking and their physiological response to the result that they want, being calm, being confident, thinking positive, calm things in a circumstance, rather than, oh my God, this is going to go always, this is going to go terribly, this is going to go badly, I'm going to die, like all that catastrophizing is certainly possible to do. And if I spent my day thinking about the numerous ways that I could die, I wouldn't leave the house. So I'm going to focus on getting to the office, doing my work, helping people. I'm going to control my imagination doing that. But that's become habit for me.
Great. What I was, you use such colorful word pictures, David. You used the word roadkill. I was like, whoa. I don't think anybody wants to volunteer for that. While you were talking, what I was thinking about, and I was agreeing with you, especially about the catastrophization, which is a form of future pacing. That's how I tend to think about it. But let me ask you about this. What about another aspect of anxiety that many people have, which is rumination? The inability to not let go of something. And what I was specifically thinking of, I've had people, when I've asked them this question, Well, what would it take you to feel better, or what would make you feel safe, or what would be a good outcome? And I have been startled sometimes where the person says, "I don't know," and so have you seen that type of thing on the rumination side when people have anxiety?
Yeah, because, their habit is to live in that narrative that they've been horrifying themselves with for whatever length of time they've been doing that. If their life's not a terrifying horror story, they don't know what it is. So getting them into that expansive, generative place of considering all the possible positive alternatives, I think is really essential for people to do. And I kind of think this is just another habit where you talk of rumination, I just immediately think of someone that's got a song stuck in their head that keeps playing. And if you've got a song stuck in your head that you don't want, well, you have to replace it with a different song. Because if you just turn it off and you've got emptiness, you've created this void, this vacuum, and your mind needs to be stimulated and it needs to be firing off thoughts and images constantly, otherwise you're dead. So, this working brain needs to be doing something. Give it something positive to do instead of all this terrifying, horrifying stuff. You've probably seen the experiments with people doing sensory deprivation, Bob, yeah?
Yeah, because I like floating in isolation tanks.
Yeah, but, people can't do that for very long. If there's no sensory input, they start to have paranoid thoughts about people poisoning their breakfast and really bizarre things. The mind needs to entertain itself with something, and it's not particularly, it doesn't particularly require these things to be positive. I was watching a show about why people like to watch horror movies last night that it's quite serendipitous because of this moment now. Clearly there is something that we enjoy about terror and horror that I think probably gets us to feel better about life or inoculates us in some way. But I don't think that once you've inoculated yourself from horror, you have to keep on doing it every day. That's not how inoculations work.
Wow, David, woo! You've blown open the, a couple of doors there. For now, I'll stay on the safe side. I don't want to move into the Bride of Chucky and territory or Freddy Krueger territory. I'll stick with thinking of the song replaying in my head with the earworm, and I think that's a safer. We can put Carole King or somebody like that, that's playing a nice piano thing. But I think you raise a very, very important point, and I hope in a future podcast we can touch on that, because the neuroscience and the neurobiology behind what's happening with, in particular, horror movies and the stimulation, which is actually similar to the experience when people go on a roller coaster and they're scared to death. And so there's new studies now that show parts of the brain that are lit up, et cetera. But that is beyond the scope of our call today. So let me ask you something that's within the scope of our call today, which is, David, you also have expertise in EEG biofeedback or neurofeedback. Can you tell our audience how you use that with clients to reduce their stress and anxiety, and what kinds of successful outcomes have you had with your clients?
Well, essentially, I use the EEG feedback to help people learn how to control their beta wave thinking, their conscious cognitive self, or their monkey mind, as people like to kind of reference, which is a nice picture to have in your head. With that feedback, people are able to see all these pre-verbalizations that happen. They get to be more aware of kind of thinking that's happening just outside of conscious awareness, and the stuff that they're consciously aware of. People really don't spend much time being aware of the 60 or 70,000 thoughts that they have every day. So to put someone into a position where they're really having to pay attention to their state of relaxation, their pace of breathing, and really have first-hand experience noticing that, even thinking, oh, I'm breathing right, causes a beta flare that might not be, which is really them just kind of not controlling their beta thinking. When someone can learn to somehow intuitively be aware that they know that they're thinking without making the narrative statement in a kind of a verbal content in the theater of their head, that means that then they've got more control over unconscious or just slightly beyond conscious anxious thinking. So that in turn helps lessen the stress from any rumination or worrying that they were doing, because they have to, or they can learn using EEG to lessen that wavelength, to lessen that activity. And of course, they can also improve their state of relaxation. I mean, I use GSR and BVP meters to kind of see their pulse, their breathing, in essence, even their temperature can be tracked. And so someone's physiological responses can be led into a really hyper-relaxed state, a very efficient relaxation state of repair, when they've got the feedback that lets them know that. Because, I mean, the body's kind of a black box. I think the first feedback device, if I'm not mistaken, was something that someone invented so that they could learn to wiggle their ears. And it was a thing they wore on their head with these mirrors so they could see their ears. And I'd been telling people for years, I have no idea how to wiggle my ears, but if I could somehow stare at them for hours a day in the mirror, I would eventually figure out what muscle makes them twitch by being really closely attentive to that. I'd get the awareness of how to do that, then I'd be able to act upon that once I learn the muscle. But people don't really understand where the muscle is to shut the hell up and relax. So giving them visuals that they can actually access and see, I think is a priceless way to get into all that internalized autonomic nervous activity that otherwise they're just oblivious to.
Great, David. What I was thinking while you were speaking was I was wondering whether or not in working with clients with the neurofeedback, have you seen patterns or noticed a pattern in terms of learning styles? What I mean is that, for example, with a visual person or auditory person or kinesthetic person, have you noticed that the way that their EEG might present in terms of anxiety or their stress for the visual person versus the auditory person?
Well, I'm aware of those different kind of learning styles, and I was a college counselor for a college that taught pre-med massage therapists, and they really had to figure out, do they learn visually best or auditorily best, so they could either re-listen to their lectures or start drawing all over their own bodies to learn all the Latin names for muscles and stuff like that. But it's not something that I've correlated with the work that I'm doing with consciousness training and stress and anxiety training using that EEG software. But it's an inspiring thing to think about, Bob. So I would be fascinated to kind of see that in operation with people under study. But as of this moment, I haven't done anything in that realm.
Something out there for us to investigate then. David, when you talked about the misuse of imagination, it brought to mind, this question that I have. You've worked with clients who deal with panic attacks and PTSD. Now, that it is a bit maybe going toward what Bob said about, rumination of how do you excise the trauma from yourself, or what is it that you change in your thinking to assuage the panic attack? How do you deal with this with your clients? What have you found works best for people?
Well, with panic attacks, what I find works best is getting people to run the drills, do the training, get to the place where they have greater mastery, so that if they notice the beginning signs of a panic attack, then they're able to diminish it much faster. It's like if you can see a couple of sparks of fire in a forest and you damp that down, it's way easier than trying to get a forest fire to stop. So I think it's preemptive, and I really I really push the idea that they shouldn't be putting themselves into panic situations until they're going to be able to cope with it and somehow interrupt that cycle before it fully takes off. However, if it is, fully taken off panic attack and their imagination's just going haywire at that point, their body's responding really terribly and they're kind of gasping for breath, then I would suggest that they focus on their breathing, bring their body into a state of relaxation, and find some kind of neutralizing statement, some affirmation that they use for themselves so that they are able to stay calm. I'm perfectly safe right now. I'm perfectly safe right now. For example, if someone's anticipating not being safe in a minute, well, in a minute, that's different. But right now, you don't have to panic because nothing's actually happening. In the realm of PTSD, the people that I've had the privilege of working with seem to have flashbacks and kind of disturbing images that come into their day. And my sense is that that is in some way unprocessed content, that because they are essentially taken into that moment as if they're reliving it right now, they're in that egoic state, the thoughts, the feelings of that state. And the egoic state, to me, is a bunch of ingredients that make this particular state of mind. They go into that state of mind. And I think that the brain, the body is in some way trying to process it and move through it. But they have a grasp and a grip over that happening because they're absolutely terrified of letting that in. So getting them to process that content in a way that feels safe, whether that's some form of imagery that's involved or whether it's retelling of their narrative in different ways, somehow in processing the content turns it into more of a memory. And I don't know about you, Christine, but I don't get flashbacks of memories, even of accidents I've had as a kid, because they're not happening anymore. So getting it to be a part of the past rather than a reoccurrent, endless now, I think is the really important thing.
I agree with you 1,000%, and you put this very well. I think much of it, something you said before, that some people or some of us, there's this fascination with horror. And so many of the media images that we get, depending on what media you're paying attention to, is about sort of inciting a fear response and, showing some threat. And if we choose to spend our time differently, having a positive memory or imagining some state of bliss or some joyful activity, but I think that's something that we're moving toward, people who do the work that you're doing or that Bob and I do, that's it's becoming more prevalent in the environment, but there's still so much focus on what terrifies us sometimes, at least in my experience, that to come to the place of, hey, this is going to be a fantastic day. I have people who support me. I'm in great health. I'm doing things to learn and to grow. I think for some of us, which is why stress is so prevalent, is that's just not habitual in our environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all have some degree of delusion going on constantly. It's what makes it possible for us to kind of live a day and not be just concerned that, I'm going to die one day. Oh my God, the planet is spinning. Oh my God, I don't know if we'll have resources. Well, I don't know if my great-great-grandchildren will be okay. I mean, there's lots of things to worry about. And since I have it on very good authority that all phobias are essentially a fear of death, and phobias are in the anxiety family, then all of this horror stuff for me could essentially be just people reconciling vulnerability and mortality. And that by forcing themselves to look at this constantly, they're trying to come to terms with the fact that they are vulnerable human, able to be injured, and that they're ultimately going to cease to exist in the level of matter at the very least. But I don't think we need to do that constantly. It becomes horrific at some point if we keep going through that lesson over and over and over again. It's a stuck habit. It's a song that keeps playing. It's that earworm, I think you said, Bob.
that will keep you under the mattress. Now, on the other side of that.
Oh my God! Wait, there's supposed to be money under the mattress. We're not supposed to be the sandwich.
Under the mattress is where the monsters are, Bob, and every child knows that monsters can't penetrate a duvet. So if you put your head under the duvet, you are safe from monsters.
I thought the boogeyman was in the closet. Well, sometimes he could be under the bed, right? He's like, oh, he's not in between the mattress. He's under the bed, right?
Wherever you imagine him to be is exactly where he lives.
Well, it's so interesting because there was a TV show called Family Guy that years ago I used to watch, and I'm sure people in the audience know about that show. In any event, there was an episode where the son, Chris, is in his bedroom, and this other kid comes in, and the kid is like saying, let's have some fun, and then he goes towards the closet, and so Chris says to him, he says, oh, you can't open that door, and the kid says, well, why not? He says, because there's a monster in there. And then the other kid says, well, if he's in there, I'm going to beat him up, right? And so he opens the door, and there really is a monster in there, and he beats the monster up. Because sometimes there really is a monster.
Absolutely. I think in his case it was an angry monkey or something.
Right. Oh, you saw that episode. So, okay.
Now we know how both of you gentlemen spend your time.
Wait. I have to add this disclaimer. I have stopped watching that show.
Yes. And I have not stopped watching that show.
Okay.
Well, if it makes you laugh, then I don't think I've ever watched it.
It's actually Christine, it's actually part of a regime that I've had. When I was breaking my insomnia cycle, I just made this vow to myself, I'm only going to watch cartoons and silly things before bed. So I switched the news off. I don't watch documentaries. I'm not looking to stimulate my brain before sleep. I don't want to see the horrors of the world and leave my brain dreaming about that unresolved emotion. So I have a habit of just watching silly cartoons, and my body appreciates that. Whether they're offensive to some people's intellects or not, I think it's just harmless fun, and it's much better to be stimulated by ink on a mylar than an actual event that's happening in real life.
I like that. Okay. So did you listen up to that, Bob? Sometimes I like to watch mindless TV, and Bob doesn't get it. The only thing that I have found is, and I think this is part of it, is another question here I want to ask you, is when my mindless activity, when I'm trying to use that to de-stress myself, and it really doesn't, it actually increases my stress by taking up more time. One of the things today that many people are dealing with, they've just got more in their to-do list than the 24 hours in a day, and you want to put aside some of those hours for sleep. Mm-hmm. How do you help your clients to see that they're just, so many hours in a day, and you need to choose what are you going to do that you're just not running like the proverbial chicken with its head cut off, because you can't get everything done, and you're stressed out trying to do everything, and there are just not enough hours for it.
Wow, that's some visual.
Yeah, a chicken with its head cut off being chased by an angry monkey.
Okay. I think we're going to get in trouble for that.
That's okay. I'm okay with that. I think we certainly have really productive lives, and there is a great deal of societal pressure for us to be really productive. But in a supervision group I attend recently, someone inspired me to buy the Underachievers Manifesto. It's a gorgeous little book that just points out the ridiculousness of being goal-oriented and missing out on your family, achieving this office in your career, and for what? This one moment of achievement. So I know when I was in my previous career in aerospace, I felt really lied to by the company. I didn't realize it until a couple of decades later, but I was there at the dawn of computerization. No one had email. We didn't use computers prior to that. This is the 80s. And to kind of enjoy my job and to be drawing on paper and mylar was fantastic. But then they give us this computer, and someone said, because of this computer, the 4-day work week is just around the corner. Because we can achieve so much more because of this computer. You won't have to be here as much. And that was nonsense. I'm already pretty satisfied with the amount of work that I get done before lunch, and I don't really feel the need to be pushing myself to achieve, what society considers the norm. Extra responsibility, overtime, it's just put on and on and on to us. I think people really need to get in check what's really important in life and stop pressuring themselves and pestering themselves with this need to be the best at what they do in the world.
There's so much to pull back from, David, when you say it, because we weren't always up and running 7 days a week. There was a day where, stores were closed one day on the weekend, or maybe twice, or they closed at 5 p.m. We're really living in a 24-hour world. Someone has to man that, even in holidays. So to get your social life in, your work life in, your commute in, really doesn't fit, and I think that's where it is so important to make choices.
Yeah, I don't think we're born to become happy consumers.
Listen, on that note, Bob and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, and I know our audience learned so much from you. You gave us, tons and tons and tons of new vocabulary words and metaphors that are just going to be part of our everyday language now.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so happy not one of them is... I'm doing good today.
Well, thank you, David. I would like you to share with our audience what are the best ways that they can get in touch with you and learn more about the great work that you do.
Okay, absolutely. They can visit my website, which is davidfairweather.ca. There are another couple of David Fairweathers on the planet, but they're not me. I am. If they're out of province or another country, they probably would want to email me. therapy@davidfairweather.ca. And if anyone from Ontario, Canada is listening, they want to get in touch by phone, I do return local phone calls, 416-820-3686. I'd be happy to hear from people, and I'm just going to help as many people as I possibly can do. So get in touch if you need help.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, David. So, audience, if you want to get in touch with David, check him out at his website, email him or call him. And that name is David, D-A-V-I-D, Fairweather, Fairweather.ca, because David is in Canada. You email him at therapy@davidfairweather.ca or give him a call, 416-820-3686.
Great. David, we've had such great fun today. What final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
I guess essentially my big message is always responsibility for self, that we're not victims unless we put ourselves into that narrative. And if we've got some control and some power over our own agency, then we can fix things by focusing on them. I want people to take action and not just wait for someone else to do it for you. If things aren't working well, then change it or get the hell out.
Wow, that's to the point. So, David, I want to thank you for being our featured guest today. And audience, I want to thank you for listening wherever you are and whatever time zone you're in right now. We have many people who are listening all over the world, and we appreciate the fact that you do so, and we trust that you'll benefit in some way from the information that we and our guests have delivered on today's show. Of course, as always, we welcome and look forward to receiving your comments about our show. Please let us know if there are additional topics you'd like to see us cover, or if there's a guest you enjoyed so much you'd like us to invite them back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how you can get more results in your day and easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and you'll receive a free gift from us. Call or email us today to schedule your appointment. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of StressFreeNow.info. Until next time, Be safe and be well.